we are starting Malachi today, and we're going to talk about twisted faith. I'll give you all the explanation and stuff for that. But before we do that, I just want to say again, I am so excited for Refuel this Friday. You heard that we're going to be on the lawn. Not only on the lawn, we're actually sectioning off part of the parking lot for people. So whether there's 10 people, whether there's 100 people, doesn't matter. We are going to gather together and worship the Lord. It's going to be great. As always, Mass are recommended, not required. But we are going to be praising God. It's going to be really, really fun. Invite other people. There's plenty of room. And also, we've been testing it out around 7 o'clock. Bring some bug spray because you're going to need it. We'll have extra bug spray as well. But just so you're aware of that. Now, the question we're going to ask today, you can see the title, Integrity and Mediocrity. How does mediocrity get into our lives? How does mediocrity get into an organization? We're going to be thinking about that today, and then also how do we get rid of it once it's there? I think it's actually a lot like there's a story of a city that lost all their water pressure in the entire city, and they did an investigation. They had to figure out what it was. They had to dig up the ground. They had to dig up the pipes. And what happened was in this pipe, there was this frog stuck in the pipe, and it was getting enough air to breathe, but basically it was clogging the pressure to the whole city, and they were trying to figure out how did it get in there because it was too big to have gotten up. Well, it wasn't big when it went up. It went up the pipe either as a tadpole or as a guppy, and basically got bigger and bigger and bigger, and so it became a big problem. That's how sin and mediocrity are in our lives. We think, oh, it's no big deal, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time it's a big enough problem, we have to dig up the ground to actually get it out of our life. To get mediocrity out takes a lot of work. So 2003, the World Cup of Rugby, England won that year. And one of the things, people have studied them. How did it work? What were they doing? What was kind of their secret sauce and stuff like that? One of the things they've discovered is just a little thing. They decided, not just the coach, but the whole team decided anyone who showed up for practice who wasn't 10 minutes early was considered late, and they could not play in the next match. You take that decision and other decisions and other decisions, and it turned into this self-discipline, raising the bar to another standard, which so often in our lives we are lowering the bar, but I'm tired, but I'm struggling, but there's a pandemic, and we just kind of keep lowering the bar, and suddenly mediocrity becomes the norm, and we wonder why we don't achieve anything that's great or big or worth giving our lives to, and then there's nothing worth giving our lives to, so then we just settle in for entertainment, which is kind of like the Novocaine for meaninglessness. And God is calling us to live for something bigger. Our prayer as Christians is your kingdom come. And I don't know about you, but this has been a hard time for me. I'm sure it's been hard for you, but that prayer continues, and God is not done working. We're in Malachi, and we're going to be talking about how God is going to challenge his people to step up. They have tied their faith in knots. We're going to talk more about that, but of course, we're going to start with some prayer. Let's pray. Dear Lord, hear us, speak to us. Help us to hear your voice. Help us to understand, Lord, what's going on in Malachi as we study this book, as we understand the historical situation of what was going on with them. Help us to understand the historical situation of what's going on with us. Lord, you call us, you challenge us because you love us. Lord, help us to stop making excuses. Help us to know you love us, but your love includes discipline and challenge. Help us to receive that today, and Lord, take a step forward. God, my prayer is for every single person listening and watching to this, whether it's on Sunday morning, Monday, months later, doesn't matter, God. My prayer is that whoever hears this will be moved by you to investigate their own life and take a step forward out of mediocrity. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, you got a Bible. Turn to Malachi. We're starting at chapter 1. And I'm going to give you some background on this. This is known as the Second Temple period. The first temple was designed by David, built by Solomon. Right after Solomon, the kingdom was divided into northern and southern. The northern kingdom was known as Israel. The southern kingdom was known as Judah. The northern kingdom was destroyed a couple hundred years later by the Assyrians. That's in 722 BC. The southern kingdom was destroyed in 586. The northern kingdom, that's the time of Isaiah and Amos and Micah. They're making these predictions and prophecies, and unfortunately, God's people didn't listen. And in 586, that's the time of Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and Esther. And once again, tragically, they wouldn't listen to the Lord. They would go to the temple, but they wouldn't change their actions, their heart, their attitude. And then Persia conquered Babylon, and the king, Cyrus, allowed the exiles to come back. This is described in the book of Ezra. And they go back under someone named Zerubbabel. Over 40,000 of them go back. That's in 539 BC. And they start working on rebuilding the temple, but they leave it unfinished. And then God sends the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, and they actually challenge the people to finish the temple, and they do. They actually follow what the prophets were saying. About 40 years later, Ezra and Nehemiah, that's in 516, they come, 458, they come, that's more than 4 years later. They come, and there's this revival. And under Ezra and Nehemiah, you can read that in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, there's this incredible revival, and people make a commitment to God. Not only did they finish the wall, that's the big thing with Nehemiah, he finished the wall in 52 days. It had been unbuilt for 70 years, left them defenseless. But they had this revival, and basically they said, we're going to honor God. We're going to take a Sabbath day of rest. We're going to make sure we marry only people who honor the Lord. And we're going to make sure that we actually bring in our offerings to God so that the priests, the leaders, the spiritual leaders of our community can be fed and lead us and do what they need to do. Tragically, only about 15 to 20 years later, Malachi comes along. We're not exactly sure where he is, but we think it's about 15 to 20, maybe 30 years later. And all those promises the people have made are starting to fade away. Because I don't know if you know this, you can make a promise to God, but unless you renew it over and over again, it starts to fade. You naturally will drift away from God unless you specifically tie yourself to the anger. The natural current of your soul, the natural current of life is to drift away from God and towards selfishness, laziness, comfort, and ease. Here's a map of what's going on at the time. This is kind of Babylon. This is where the exiles were. They kind of traveled home. Malachi is written in this time. There's a whole bunch of people still back in Persia, still back in Babylon. There's people scattered. People are in the promised land. They have their wall. They have the temple. They're doing kind of God things, but there's living what we would call a sort of faith. You know what I mean by that? Sometimes we call it being lukewarm. That kind of like, I love God, but I don't really go all in. I totally believe in Jesus, but I don't know that I really want to sacrifice for him. I'm kind of in, but not really. I'm halfway devoted. I want kind of the me version of Christianity. It's that sort of faith. And what happened is, in Malachi, people had tied their faith up in knots. That's why we have all the knots on the graphics and everything like that. And they've tied their faith up in knots, and then they blamed God for those knots. And the book of Malachi is very cool because it's written in the first person. And so God's asking them these questions, and they're asking God questions back that are kind of accusatory questions. Like, who are you to ask me that? And it's this back and forth dialogue that's very personal, but very challenging. And as we dive into this, I want you to be thinking about, have I tied up any parts of my life in knots? I won't forgive that person. I won't make a commitment to do what God asked me to do. God's commands are suggestions, not commands. Have you tied up your faith in knots? And then when you realize that life doesn't work, unforgiveness doesn't work, lack of commitment to God doesn't work, you know what we do? We go, God, why haven't you blessed me? When God has told us exactly the path to walk on, and then we won't walk on it, and then we blame God for how our lives turn out. We got to make a choice, and Malachi is a challenging book that says, will you make that choice to be fully devoted to God? In Malachi's time, they are at a decision point. You may not know this. You probably do. Malachi is the last prophet of the Old Testament. After this, there are no more prophets. God basically has said, you've heard what I need to tell you. Make a decision. I don't need to say any more. And they are about to face major challenges. The Greeks, less than 100 years after Malachi, are going to defeat the Persians, and they're going to make their way down under Alexander the Great, and they are going to conquer Judah. And there's going to be a major cultural challenge of how do we hold on to our faith when the whole world is changing, because the whole world was changing. This is a decision point for them, and my friends, I'm sure you know this is a decision point for us as well. The question isn't, will the world change through the pandemic? We know it's going to. The question is, will you get a deeper faith at this decision point to say, God, you actually used that hard time in the world to make me stronger than I've ever been before, and I'm ready for the storm that's coming in the future. I'm ready for what's next. I think that's what God's up to. Malachi chapter 1, starting at verse 1. Here we go. This is the message that the Lord gave to Israel through the prophet Malachi. I've always loved you, says the Lord. That's a good thing. But here's their answer. Really? Really? You love me? How have you loved me? How have you loved us? And the Lord replies, this is how I showed my love to you. I loved your ancestor Jacob, but I rejected his brother Esau, and I devastated the hill country. I turned Esau's inheritance into a descendants for jackals. He's talking about the country of Edom. Esau's descendants in Edom may say, we've been shattered, but we'll rebuild the ruins. But the Lord of heaven's armies replied, they may try to rebuild, but I will demolish them again. Their country will be known as the land of wickedness, and their people will be called the people with whom the Lord is forever angry. When you see the destruction for yourselves, you will say, truly, the Lord's greatness reaches beyond Israel's borders. Edom would not repent. God sent prophets to them. They wouldn't turn to the Lord. God is fair to all countries, all people. They wouldn't repent. But here's the point he's trying to say, Israel, Judah, here's what I'm trying to say to you. I have shown you my love because I've protected you over and over and over again. I just sent you a guy named Nehemiah who rebuilt the wall. And don't you understand? You had 70 years where you had no wall and you weren't even invaded. This is a time of invasions. And if they went after the hill country, Edom, which is not as valuable land as it is Judah, because Judah is a crossroads between Egypt and the Middle East and to the northern Middle East, God protected you. Don't you understand his love for you? But they're saying, that doesn't count. It's not enough. You never loved me. It's like the person who says, how many presents did you get from me? You need more. I need more. I need more. It's never enough. That's kind of like how we are with God. God says, I'm going to give you this blessing and this blessing and this blessing. And you go, yeah, well, whatever. What else have you done for me? You haven't made my life exactly perfect, so it's not enough. You ever have a little tantrum? You ever throw a little pity party? I've had a couple of pity parties in the last couple of months where I just sat down and felt sorry for myself. Sometimes we need to get that out a little bit, but it's not helpful. We got to turn back to God and say, what are you doing in this time of life? What are you doing in this time of history? In their time, they're going, we don't have a king. We're not a great country. We don't have an army. That's why God keeps calling himself the Lord of heaven's armies. I'm the one protecting you. Trust me. What do you think? It's normal that an invading Persian king would say, I'll pay for you to go back and I'll pay for the temple to be rebuilt? You think that's normal? He's trying to wake them up and they're living in a tantrum pity party. Verse 6. The Lord of heaven's armies says to the priest, a son honors his father and a servant respects his master. If I'm your father and if I'm your master, where are the honor and respect I deserve? That's a good question for all of us to be asking. You've shown contempt for my name, but you ask, how have we ever shown contempt for your name? We go to church, we make our sacrifices, we do that stuff. That's the question they're asking, not us. We're the people of God. We're the chosen ones. We're called. We're in Israel. We're the ones who came back from exile. God, not us. We would never do that. Not us. We're the people who are doing the right things. It's not the pagans. Those people out in the world, they're terrible. And often Christians go, not us who are not respecting God, not us who are dishonoring God. No, not us. It must be the other people. What were they doing? God's going to answer that in the very next verses. You've asked, how have we ever shown contempt for your name? Verse 7, you've shown contempt by offering defiled sacrifices on my altar. And you ask, what defiled sacrifices? You defile them by saying the altar of the Lord deserves no respect. When you give blind animals as sacrifices, isn't that wrong? And isn't it wrong to offer animals that are crippled and diseased? Because the Bible says to bring God your first and your best. Let me say it again, your first and your best. Try giving gifts like that to your governor. If they're not good enough for your governor, why is it good enough for God? Why have we lowered God again and again and again and said, God's fine with my leftovers, God's fine with my nothing, God's fine with whatever I want to give him? Try giving gifts like that to your governor and see how pleased he is, says the Lord of heaven's armies. We do this with our time, with our talent, with our money, with our energy, with our attitude, with our attention. We give God our leftovers and say, at least you got something, God. And you should be happy you got anything from me. Go ahead, beg God to be merciful to you. But when you bring that kind of offering, why should he show you any favor at all? You're not giving God your best, but you want God's best in return. You're not really plugging into God's power, but you want God's power in your life. It doesn't work that way. How I wish, verse 10, you would shut the temple doors so that these worthless sacrifices couldn't even be offered. I'm not pleased with you, says the Lord of heaven's armies, and I will not accept your offerings. I need you to hear that because it shocks us. Because in our culture, if you gave something, that's all that counts. If you gave something, that's all that counts. This does not mean that God wants a certain amount of time, energy, money, finances from you, but he wants your best. Jesus said the woman who gave 2 little coins gave more than all else because she gave her best. She gave her all. It's not about the money. It's not about how you measure it, but it is about your best. You know what your best is. And for most of us, we're not giving God our best. We're giving God our leftovers and saying, that's enough. You should just be happy I'm giving you something, God. And then we go, God, why isn't it working? Why is my life not working? Why am I not experiencing your power? Have you ever tried giving God your best? I will not accept your offerings. This is a biblical truth. It comes up many times in the Bible, starting with Cain early on. God is under no obligation if you do not bring your best. He's under no obligation to accept your offering. Will you bring your best? And what about the people in other countries? God addresses that. Verse 11. My name is actually honored by people of other nations from morning until night. People not even in the promised land. All around the world they offer sweet incense and pure offerings in honor of my name. For my name is great among the nations, says the Lord of heaven's armies. But you dishonor my name with your actions. By bringing contemptible food, you're saying it's all right to offer, by saying it's all right to defile the Lord's table. You say it's too hard to serve the Lord, and you turn up your noses at my command, says the Lord of heaven's armies. Think of it. Animals that are stolen and crippled and sick are being presented as offerings. Should I accept from you since offerings is these? Cursed is the cheat who promises to give a fine ram from his flocks, but then sacrifices a defective one to the Lord. For I am a great king, says the Lord of heaven's armies, and my name is feared among the nations. If it's feared among the nations, it should be honored among God's people. My friends, honor the king. Honor the king. God is our great king. Honor the king. Give God your best. Don't cheat the Lord. Don't give leftovers. Don't give God I gave my best energy on Saturday night and I got nothing left on Sunday morning. What's the best time for me to do my devotions? Do them then. I don't have time. I can't give God who made all time and gives me time as a gift, and my time on earth is limited. I can't give him 15 minutes a day. I can't honor God and say, I will worship you. I will rest because you give me work, and so I can give you rest for one day because it's a command. It's not an option. You can ignore it, but you will twist up your own life, and you will hurt yourself, and you will then blame God for how bad your life is when you've disobeyed him. Honor the king. We give more honor to our coaches who say, You have to be here at this thing all the time, and we say, yes, absolutely, I will do it. And then God says, you need to do this, and you go, maybe. I mean, I'll try. I'll try my best. You know, maybe. I'm definitely going to give it my effort. And I hear this over and over and over again because we think, because Jesus gave his life for free, we think it's cheap and worthless. And we forget that he is the King of the universe. He gave us that. Honor the King. The first job I had, I was working at a place. I worked for a guy who's a Christian, strong Catholic man. And I asked him, do you tend to hire Christians to the store? It's an entry-level place. And he said, no. We had all these good faith conversations, good talking, good stuff like that. We had all this stuff going on, right? And I asked him, do you tend to hire Christians? And he says, no. And I said, why not? He goes, because it makes no difference in their work ethic. And I remember thinking, I was raised, that verse in Colossians, which is, work as if you were working for God. And I said to him, I'm going to prove to you that it does make a difference in my life. And I worked hard, and I got promotions, like 10-cent raises. I mean, it was big, right? But I got those promotions, and I earned his trust. And I remember thinking, I'm not working for this person, this good or bad boss, doesn't matter. I'm working for God, and how I work reflects my character, and no one's going to hold me to that character standard if it's not me. I want to honor the King in the way I work. I want to honor the King in the way I obey. I want to honor the King in the way I live my life. And I have to tell you, my friends, there is power in living this. We want to say, I want the power of God, but I won't plug into the wall. I want the power of God, but I won't dig my roots deep into him. John 15:5, I am the vine, you are the branches. Stop trying to live in your own power. Don't you understand the point of John 15:5? There's power in the name of Jesus. We just sang it. And then we go, but I'm going to forget the name of Jesus 6 days a week and try to live in my own power, and then I'm going to wind up empty, and then go, God, man, where are you? Whoever abides in me and I abide in them will bear much fruit. Colossians 2:7. Let your roots grow down deep into him. Let your lives be built on him. And then what? What's the result of that? You will grow strong in the truth you were taught. You feel strong right now? In the truth you were taught? And you will overflow with gratitude. Do you feel that? Maybe if you're in a time where more is being pulled on you, you need to go deeper. But for many of us, we were taught when more is being expected of you, work, do more. And now I'm trying to say to you, pull back and go deeper into God. Maybe 15 minutes a day isn't even enough. Maybe it needs to be 30 because life is hard right now. You're here, you're watching, you're connected. I love that. But maybe you need to say, Wednesday I need to be doing worship as well. I need to be listening to worship music all week. I need to be increasing my prayer time because we are in a time of trial. Yes? If more is going to be pulled out of you, you got to dig in more into you. We know that. That happens. Okay? Now, you look at this story, you look at what's going on, and you go, how could the people do this? Right? They're saying these things about God, and they're kind of going, how is that? How is that? Okay? They said in verse 13, it's too hard to serve the Lord. And I cannot tell you, my friends, how many times I've heard that exact line from God's people. It's too hard. It's too hard to go to church every week. It's too hard to read the Bible. It's too hard to give financially. It's too hard to serve in ministry. It's too hard to do it all together. Definitely not too hard to binge my shows. Definitely not too hard to spend money on toys. Definitely not too hard to overextend myself into debt. Definitely not too hard to do that stuff. But it's too hard to follow God. We twist up our faith in knots, and then we cry out to God and go, why did you let me do this? It's your fault. You must not love me. Because remember what God said at the beginning? I've loved you. And you go, how have you loved me? Look at what's happening. And to these people, God's trying to say, don't you remember what happened with Nehemiah? When you finally got beyond your fear and stepped up and were devoted to me, don't you remember in 60 days, 52 days, your whole country changed because you were willing to step up and be devoted. There's not just a problem with the people. There's a problem with the leaders. Because the question we have to ask is not just, why would the people bring defective offerings? The question is, why would the priests accept those offerings? Because again, if we're talking about mediocrity, in order for mediocrity to happen, someone has to accept it. Someone has to say, yeah, it's blind, but it's fine. Yeah, it's crippled, but it's okay. Yeah, you're giving your leftovers, but at least you're bringing something. Other people aren't even bringing anything. Why would the priests, knowing that God's rules specifically forbid that, why would they accept a halfway offering? We're going to go on into chapter 2. We're going to talk about integrity. We're going to talk about leadership. And this applies to all of us. But we're going to talk about why would they accept less than the best to God? Because they're making God's name be dishonored. Chapter 2, verse 1. Listen, you priests. This command's for you. Listen to me and make up your minds to honor my name, says the Lord of heaven's armies, or I will bring a terrible curse against you. I will curse even the blessings you receive. And indeed, I've already cursed them because you've not taken my warning to heart. I'm going to punish your descendants and splatter your faces with the feces of your festival sacrifices. What a vivid image. Ew. Yeah. And I will throw you on the manure pile. Then at last you'll know it's I who sent this warning, so that my covenant with the Levites can continue, says the Lord of heaven's armies. And the purpose of my covenant with the Levites was to bring life and peace. And that's what that gave them. And this required reverence from them, honoring of the name of the Lord from them. And they greatly revered me and stood in awe of my name. And they passed on to the people the truth of the instructions they received from me. That's the job. They didn't lie or cheat. They walked with me. That's integrity, living good and righteous lives. And they turn many from lives of sin. Being a priest is not a job. It's an influence to help people walk with God and turn away from sin. That's the job. The word of a priest's lips should preserve knowledge of God, and people should go to him for instruction. For the priest is the messenger of the Lord of heaven's armies. But you, priests, have left God's paths. Your instructions have caused many to stumble into sin. You've corrupted the covenant I've made with the Levites, says the Lord of heaven's armies. So I've made you despised and humiliated in the eyes of all the people, for you've not obeyed, but shown favoritism in the way you carried out my instructions. What was happening then? Why were the offerings accepted by the priests, even though they weren't very good, even though they were defective, even though they were crippled, even though they were sick? Why would they accept them? Because the leaders themselves were not honoring God in their own actions. The leaders themselves had lowered their own standards to mediocrity, so they had no right in their minds to expect something better from the people. The leader had compromised his or her own integrity, then continues to lower that standard among others. I don't really worship, so I can't ask you to worship. I'm not really in the Word. I'm not going to ask you to be in the Word. Suddenly the standards of God get lowered, and you start creating your own standards. Well, this is what it really means to be a Christian. Not really based on Jesus. It's just based on what I think a Christian should do and shouldn't do. It's not based on the authority of God. It's based on my authority. And I create my own version of that and then say, this is what you should do. We keep lowering those standards, and suddenly there's mediocrity. And suddenly we wonder why Christian life in America and the American church doesn't have power, because maybe we're not plugged into the power source. Maybe if we just say, God, I'm going to honor your name from morning to night, twisted up faith is seeped in. And we're going to talk about integrity. Let's show this next picture. This next picture I took just a few weeks ago, and it's on the way up to Mount Whitney. There's no trees there because it's above the tree line. This is at 12,000 feet. And I have to tell you, I would not want to go there with someone who had never been there before, because a thunderstorm comes in, it's dangerous. There's no shelter. You don't want to be going to these places without people who have some experience. But how many people step up to be Christian leaders and they haven't walked there before? They don't have that integrity in their own life, and they go, but follow me. Because for way too many of us, leadership is a position. It's about power. It's about title. Instead of going, no, this is about actually influencing people to get closer to Jesus. I have paid the price to honor the name of the Lord, and I want to challenge you to pay the price to honor the name of the Lord. I will call you out on your mediocrity, even if you don't like me for it. No one's going to like you if you call out mediocrity. I can promise you that. That's a lifetime of experience sharing with you. No one is going to like you for that. They're going to dislike you for that. But you do not want to go to 12,000 feet if you haven't had someone who's been there before. Leaders can't lead where they haven't lived. Leaders can't lead where they haven't lived. Let's talk about 3 key things about that. First, Christian leaders are followers first. Christian leaders are followers first. Jesus revealed this absolutely powerful but insane notion. He picked the powerless, the rejected, the overlooked, but he taught them how to live in a way that was dependent on the Father. Jesus kept saying, Spirit. Jesus kept saying, Father. He taught them how to do the impossible. The impossible. When they came to feed 5,000, you know what he said to the disciples? You feed them. He taught them how to pray. He taught them how to access the power of God. So later on, they learned this lesson. These nobodies stood before the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin are like, who are these people? They have power, but they're nobodies. They stood before governors. They stood before the emperor. And the emperor said, well, I can take away your life. And they said, no, you can't. All you can do is kill my body. My life is with Jesus. They had never met people who had power like this before. Jesus says, follow me. Christian leaders are followers. God is not your advisor. God is your boss. God is your king. God is your master. We have lowered Jesus to being our best friend, who his job is only to support us. He can never tell us we've done anything wrong. His job is just to say, you're wonderful, you're great, you're amazing, you're pretty, I love you. And if God dared to say to us what he's saying in Malachi, we'd say, I don't know if I like that. I don't want to be your friend anymore. And God, I'm going to hurt your feelings by walking away from you. I'm going to hurt you, but actually it's going to hurt me. And then later on we go, I walked away from God, and it's all his fault for letting my life be ruined because of it. This is how twisted our thinking is. And Malachi calls it out. We got to be followers first. Jesus gave us a way of doing leadership, and I would challenge you, whether you're at your home, whether you're in your business, or whether you're a ministry leader, are you leading in the way of Jesus, or are you trying to lead in the way of the world? And just sprinkle a little Jesus on top of it. Get a little Jesus t-shirt and say, I haven't changed anything, but I got the Jesus bumper sticker. Are you actually living it out? Early on, and when the church was being formed, I was helping start and lead the worship team. I've done this multiple times. I have the same speech. Every time I'm starting up the worship team, I always have the same speech. This is not about music. This is about worship. Music and concerts and stuff like that, they have one sort of expectation, and worship has another expectation. Worship is about actually loving someone and singing to someone. So we want people who are fully devoted to worshiping God. And I say this to the worship team, the people who are the potential worship team people, and every single one of them says, oh yes, Scott, absolutely believe you 100% totally. Now experience will tell you, don't listen to that. So I went to each one and said, are you fully devoted to loving Jesus? And can I see it in your face? Because I want your singing to be an example for others. I want your worship to be an example for others. Because devotion starts with the leaders. Worship starts with the worship team. Are you on fire for the Lord? And I asked each person individually, looking them in the eye. They did not appreciate this. I'm not doing it to appreciate them. I'm doing it to honor the king. And there's a way of doing this kindly and nicely. You don't have to be mean about it. So I say to this one person, he says, well, I love the guitar, and I like Jesus. And I said, well, let's wait. And he goes, but don't you understand how this is going to cost your worship team, and what I could bring to the worship team and the difference I can make to this worship team? And I said, you could increase our music. But you remember what I said? I don't care if the music's that great. I want the worship And until you're ready to worship, you're not ready for the worship team because you're an incredible musician, but I'm looking for incredible worshipers. My friends, I need you to understand this. I can teach anyone how to play an instrument. I can teach people how to lead. I can teach people how to do youth ministry, adult ministry, lead a life group. I can't teach you how to love Jesus if you refuse to live the habits. That's a choice you have to make. The worst thing I could do is put you into a position of leadership and say, I'm not sure if they actually love Jesus. I'm not sure if they're fully devoted, but I'm going to put them in this position. Leadership is not a position. It's influencing people closer to God. Leaders are followers first. This person wasn't on the worship team. He was not happy about it, but he stayed in the church. He grew a heart for worship. It took over a year, but he wound up on the worship team, and it blessed the worship. But he was a worshiper. And later he thanked me for being willing to have the guts to say the hard thing into his life. Because he always thought, if I'm good on the guitar, that's the same as worship. And it's not. Okay? Leaders are followers first. Here's what Dwight Eisenhower said. In order to be a leader, a man must have followers. And to have followers, a man must have their confidence. Hence, the supreme quality of a leader is unquestionably integrity. Without it, no real success is possible, no matter whether it's on the section gang, the football field, in an army, or in an office. If a man's associates find him guilty of phoniness, if they find that he lacks forthright integrity, he will fail. His teachings and actions must square with each other. The first great need, therefore, is integrity and high purpose. My friends, we have a high purpose. The question is, are we willing to do the integrity work? We're followers first. Number two, character matters most. As Christians, we need to root ourselves in God's word and live with integrity because character matters most. We need to think deeply. We need to ask good questions. We need to devotedly follow Jesus. We need to pursue God's righteousness in our own lives, always asking, what's the next area of my life that needs work? If you have a Christian leader who says, I'm good, I'm done, I'm whatever, then you're done growing. But leaders are learners. Leaders are always saying, what can I do next? And we pursue God's justice in the world. Leaders have to pay the price with self-discipline. Self-discipline. Character matters. And I need to say to you, that is not a popular word, because for the last decades, couple hundred years, we've been living into this thing called humanism, which says, whatever you feel is right. Whatever you think is good. That goes squarely against the Bible, which says a lot of what you feel ain't right. A lot of what you think isn't good. And you can become a slave to your own desires. That's what in our culture we call addictions. But you can't just get addicted to chemicals. You can get addicted to laziness. You can get addicted to mediocrity. You can get addicted to comfort. You can get addicted to greed. You can get addicted to lust. You can get addicted to overeating. You can get addicted to anything you can get addicted to. There is a price of self-discipline that leaders need to pay that price. We need to follow the way of Jesus. Okay? Character matters most. In our church, we talk about these biblical ways of Jesus. 3 roots: love God, love others, reach out to a lost, needy, and hurting world. Every single one of the 7 rhythms of life, there's 168 hours in the week. You add all these things up, it's about 6 or 7 hours total being in church and being in a life group and reading the word and sharing your faith and helping those in need and giving generously. Every single one of those goes back to Jesus. Jesus invented groups. And I have people say to me, well, I don't have time to be in a group. I don't have time. And my question is, are you willing to obey Jesus? Jesus modeled that you need to be in a group. Do you think Jesus really needed to be in a group? You think he did it for himself, or do you think he did it for us? We need to be in groups because Jesus taught us that. And you know what's crazy? Christians ignore this principle while the business world follows that. When they create teams of generally 9 to 12 people. The business world has often followed the example of Jesus better than the church. We have got to stop saying, I can do whatever I want. Life groups are optional. You don't have to do a Covenant Grove life group, but you need to do a group. It's not optional. You need to give. You need to serve in ministry. You need to honor God's name in worship. Jesus did every single one of these. This isn't a Covenant Grove thing. This is a Jesus thing. And at the end of the day, we have to ask the question, especially among our leaders, are you willing to follow the way of Jesus, or do you want to follow your own way and just say, that's good enough? Are you willing to pay the price of self-discipline? The first person you lead is yourself. The first person you lead is yourself. And you got to do that inner journey, that inner hard work, and you got to figure out, why can't I do this? Why am I getting in my own way? Why am I struggling to say yes to this? Because of those three things on the screen, one of them is going to come natural to you, one of them is going to be so-so, and the third one is where the real work happens, because it is nothing but obedience. I'm not naturally good at evangelism. I'm not naturally desiring to go help people who are poor, needy, and hurting. Just leave me alone. I don't want to be around them. But I do it out of obedience, and now it's a habit in my life, and it has transformed me. We need all three roots. They're all commands. They're all biblical. The question is, will you do them? In our church, we are trying to say, we want to pass on the way of Jesus to people. Not the way of the church, not the way of American Christianity. We want to pass on the way of Jesus, which means everyone we have in leadership, everyone, we want them to be living the way of Jesus, exemplified by these things on the screen. And I need to tell you, the reason I have small print at the bottom is because those things that we challenge our people to do, they're actually not even the hard things. They're the beginning things. You want to go deeper into accountability, fasting, spiritual direction, mission trips, giving up your vacation, supporting kids in other countries, praying daily for evangelism opportunities. They're deeper steps, but we're stumbling on the easy steps. General Schwarzkopf said this: I've met a lot of leaders in the army who were very competent, but they didn't have character. And for every job they did well, they sought a reward in the form of promotions, in the form of awards and decorations, in the form of getting ahead at the expense of someone else, in the form of another piece of paper that awarded them another degree, a sure road to the top. You see, these were competent people, but they lacked character. I've also met a lot of leaders who had superb character but lacked competence. They weren't willing to pay the price of leadership, to go the extra mile, because that's what it took to be a great leader. And that's sort of what it's all about. To lead in the 21st century, to take soldiers, sailors, airmen into battle, you will be required to have both character and competence, and that lead us to the third thing: refuse mediocrity. Refuse mediocrity. Someone has got to have the guts to stand up and say, what about you? Tell me how that fits in your life. Let me actually see how that looks. Someone has got to have to do that. Don't accept mediocrity in your own life, because we know that the priests accepted mediocrity because they were accepting mediocrity in their own life, so they accepted it in others. Start by not accepting mediocrity in your own life, saying, I'm going to step up. I'm going to pay the price. I'm going to do what's needed. And you can be nice about it. And then ask people to do something. Don't ask them to do what you're not willing to do, but pay the price to do what God's commanded you to do, and then challenge other people to do it as well. I remember one time I was a new youth pastor in a church. We sat down with the youth group, and we're going to be doing this with our youth group soon, and we said, what do you want this youth ministry to be all about? What do you want us to be defined at? What are those rhythms that you want us to have? And they shared, well, we want to have some fun. We want to focus a little bit on God. We want to do, worship. We want to have the kind of, games. We want to make sure we can invite our friends. Said all this stuff's really good. And we went through these things of Jesus, started looking at these verses and the call of Jesus, like take up your cross and follow me. And I said to them, one thing we're not going to compromise on is this is going to be about Jesus. And I make you this promise: if you have your life fully devoted to Jesus, it won't push your friends away. It will actually draw them in, because the world is waiting to see devoted people. And they said, cool, we're in. Scott, that sounds great. So first teaching time comes up, and we're teaching, and there's this guy in the corner named Adam. He's talking it up, doing his thing. And in the past, that was always fine in this youth group, because at least they're there. Isn't that what we say all the time? At least the teenagers were there. We don't need their attention. We don't need their devotion. We don't need any of that. At least they're there. Please stop saying that to yourself. And I said, Adam, stop talking. And he said, okay. 5 minutes later, he's talking again. I said, Adam, get out. Go talk with the leader. Come back in 5 or 10 minutes. He was in shock that someone actually called him out. And the entire room was, what's just happening? No one had held them to the standard that they had agreed to. Don't forget, just a week before, we all said we're going to live by this standard. Who's going to have the guts to refuse mediocrity? He left the room, talked to a leader, came back. He and I talked later on, and we were cool. But that whole room realized in that minute, something is going to change in this group. And my friends, I need you to understand, every ministry I've been in has grown because we've been willing to call out mediocrity and say, this is how we're going to do it. There's power in that. I want to live the way of Jesus, not the Scott Nelson way, the way of Jesus. And when you live that, things grow. Later on, when Adam came and talked to me, he apologized. But he was doing that thing where he was expecting an apology from me. You know that thing? I know I'm sorry, but it seems a little bit harsh. I didn't back down. I said, it is harsh, but I'm going to hold you to what Jesus asked, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And that's what I'm saying at Covenant Grove. We've been doing that. I will not apologize for the way of Jesus. It's my calling. And I want to surround myself with leaders who are unashamed and refuse mediocrity in their own lives. And the lives we're not talking about perfection. We're talking about giving God our best. I want you to look at this list again. Look at these roots. Okay? And I want you to say, which one of them do I need some work on? Don't have 5, 10 things. I'm talking about 1 or 2 things where you go, I need to get into a team. I need to start serving. I need to start sharing my faith. Does the pandemic mean we can't talk to people about Jesus? You got a Friday night event for Refuel. You can invite people to that. I want to challenge you to invite 3 people to that. Okay? What about serving people's needs? What about getting into the Word? What about financial giving? Can you trust God in those things? Can you live that? And I want to give you this thing. If you're already doing these rhythms, please come talk to me because we want to get you into a position where you can influence other people. This is Jesus' way. And this is what we're all about. I want you to take a second and look inside and say, can I do these things? Can I have the rhythms and the habits of faith that grow these 3 roots in my life? Your spiritual habits determine your spiritual health, and your spiritual health affects everything. Will you refuse mediocrity and take that step today? Pray with me. Dear God, it's a challenging sermon. It's a challenging chapter, Lord, but we're here to hear your word. Lord, help us to step up. Help us not to feel overwhelmed with guilt and shame and anything like that. That's not what you're about, Lord. But you are challenging us and calling us to look into our own lives and say, where do we need to step up? Lord, be with our church. Lord, what I see and what you're doing, you're growing people and you're calling people and you're encouraging people and you're giving them grit and resiliency and perseverance. Lord, be with us as we refuse mediocrity in our own lives and in our church, and help us to trust that even though people will not thank us and even though some people will leave, Lord, help us to trust that as we do this gently and with kindness, that your kingdom will come and your power will flow in us, and we will overflow with gratitude. Jesus, we love you. Move in this place. We pray this in your name. Amen.